And we welcome you to the live Exit Philosophy post MLB Trade Deadline broadcast. And yes, we know we are in the middle of a Blue Jays game against the Orioles right now, but our focus is not on that, although I can tell you that the Jays are currently losing 6-1 in Baltimore. That game is now in the bottom of the sixth inning as we kick this thing off. So mute the TV and pull us up on your laptop. YouTube.com/@exitphilosophy is where we are here. And we want to get right into this, Griff. Trade deadline.
The Chris Bassett struggled in Baltimore tonight. He struggled in that game. And I'm wondering if at all he was the subject of a lot of trade rumors as the deadline approached, and maybe it did affect him a little bit, but he wasn't very good. There was no swing and miss in his game tonight, and he's already out of the game. So yeah, join us here. It's more interesting than what's going on in Baltimore.
It is. It could also be that the Orioles are good and have a lot of left-handed hitters, but I think it's a fair point, Griff. There was a lot of talk around some of the guys who had term left on their deals, and Bassett is one of those, signed through next year. But as you can see on our banner, the Blue Jays acquire 14 players. 13 of those are prospects, with sincere apologies to Ryan Yarbrough, who should enjoy pitching at Rogers Center, because whenever he has in the past, it's gone quite well. He was the old lefty nemesis when he pitched for the Rays, but that's the return the Jays got in the Kevin Kiermaier deal. So he'll just eat up some innings between now and the end of the season. But 13 prospects, 8 deals over the last, Griff, 4 or 5 days?
Yeah, I think the last 4 days. But the Ryan Yarbrough thing is interesting because they were going to have to eat Kevin Kiermaier's contract no matter what, because they put him on waivers. Everybody had a chance to get him for nothing. And nobody took the contract. So the Blue Jays knew that this was not going to be part of their plan of getting below the threshold of the luxury tax. So instead, they reached out to a guy who was already designated for assignment by the Dodgers, Ryan Yarbrough, someone who's familiar with the American League East, someone who's, as you pointed out, has had success at Rogers Center, albeit he was pitching against the Blue Jays, which might have contributed to his success. But, I mean, he can't break a pane of glass, but he can give you 2 innings as an opener or give you length in middle relief. And Lord knows they're going to need a lot of that in the last 50-some games, because this pitching staff, especially the middle relief in the bullpen, is not going to be very good. So Ryan Yarbrough has a role. They're going to pay Kevin Kiermaier's contract, and God bless everyone.
So just to contextualize, and we're going to treat this like a podcast episode, and we may end up repeating some things that we discussed in the episode of Exit Philosophy that dropped yesterday being Monday. And as you can see on the scroll across the bottom of the screen, new episodes of Exit Philosophy drop each and every Monday wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we try to get the episode uploaded to YouTube usually by no later than Tuesday or Wednesday, so a day or two delay on that. But 3 trades had been made when we recorded over the lunch hour on Monday. We're now up to 8, and that's where it will end, Griff. So I'll do a quick rundown here, and then we'll just start to pull and give general thoughts on this. The Blue Jays getting an outfielder by the name of Jonathan Clase and a catcher named Jacob Sharp from the Mariners for Jimmy Garcia. That was the first of the 8.
Yeah, let me just, as we put each one up, just a quick comment on it. Okay. The Class A is in Buffalo now. He was batting leadoff his first game there. He stole 79 bases at 2 levels last year. And it's something that we've talked about. You and I have talked about on Exit Philosophy, the need for excitement, the need for athletes. And he's a guy that at some point later in this season is going to be at the major league level, and he'll get a chance to show what he can do. The catcher is just inventory. He wasn't in anyone's prospect list, top 30, and he will just be a body probably important at spring training to go out in the bullpen and catch those early days of 8 pitchers across, and he'll be one of the catchers.
Nate Pearson was shipped to the Cubs, and we expressed our surprise at this on the podcast episode that dropped yesterday. I guess the Cubs are looking at Nate Pearson as a guy who, I mean, once was a can't miss prospect, was considered a top 10 prospect around the game. There have been injuries, there have been illness. I've wondered if there was more of a focus of trying to shatter brick walls with 110 mile per hour fastballs more than focusing on the craft. But Nate Pearson had high upside, and it just didn't work out in Toronto for a variety of reasons. The Jays get an outfielder from the Cubs named Yohendrick Pinango and an infielder named Josh Rivera. And these are not guys, Griff, anywhere near the top of the Chicago Cubs prospect list. I mean,
yeah. And when Ross Atkins spoke to us less than an hour ago, he emphasized that the deal for Nate Pearson was because he was approached by the Cubs. They see something in him. You know, the arm is still there. And as we pointed out on the regular episode of Exit Philosophy, whenever a player is struggling, there's an organization that thinks they can fix him. So Nate Pearson is that guy. Nate is there were 6 expiring contracts to become free agents. They traded every one of those. And then Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, which we'll get to, and Nate Pearson. So Nate, as you point out, the outfielder in the deal, Yohendrick Pinango, was number 29 out of 30 listed prospects in the Cubs organization. He moves up to 26 in the Blue Jays on MLB Pipeline. And Josh Rivera, the shortstop, reported to New Hampshire, and he's not in the Jays top 30 at all.
And then a tough one. Again, an expiring contract, and Griff felt like up until about 6 weeks ago, you and I were both of the opinion that the Blue Jays needed to bring Danny Jansen back in free agency. And I know that trading him out doesn't mean they can't go and bring him back in the offseason as a free agent if both sides are interested in doing so. But Danny just stopped hitting a couple of months ago, and he is a guy who hits for a lot of pop. There's a lot of loft in his swing, and when it's going, it's going, and when it's not going, it really isn't going, and it can not go for a while, and he was in one of those funks. And so they get 3 pieces back from the Boston Red Sox: Cutter Coffey, an infielder, another infielder, Edinson Paulino, and a young starting pitcher, Gilberto Batista. And I think this one probably hit Jays fans hardest emotionally. Yeah,
for sure. I know, and so many people have come out since the trade and told me about how much they're going to miss Danny Jansen, how he was one of their favorite players, even though, you know, as you pointed out, his offensive numbers were down. But Ross Atkins also suggested, and I'm sure he wasn't pleased that John Schneider was talking about the possibility of both Kikuchi and Danny Jansen returning as free agents later on. I'm sure he wasn't thrilled with that because the deals really hadn't been done yet. But he did confirm, Atkins confirmed that he's open to the possibility, but in his usual Ross Atkins way, he said, but I shouldn't be talking about players with other organizations. You just traded them. You know?
He's no longer at the forefront of your environment, so you can't
get around to that quote.
you can't be speaking about people who are not at the forefront of your environment.
Yeah, but those 3 prospects, the shortstop, Cutter Coffey, I mean, everybody loves the name, and names seem to get you a long way in terms of, you know, in terms of fan appreciation. But he's not on anybody's top 20 list. He showed some power, top 30 list. He showed some power, but he's a long way from being a finished product. And number 20 on the Blue Jays prospect list is the infielder Edinson Paulino that you spoke about. And the right-handed pitcher is too young to even be on anyone's list. So again, Danny Jansen, they were intent on trading all 6 expiring contracts, and they were able to do it, even if it went down to the last minute before the 6 o'clock deadline this afternoon.
Yeah. So everything that we've just discussed happened before our podcast episode dropped yesterday, and now everything we're about to talk about has happened since. And it begins with my last memory of Justin Turner in a Toronto Blue Jays uniform. Griff is going to be making that pretty nice diving play at first base.
Absolutely.
Saved at least one run on that play, and I know they went on to lose that first game of the doubleheader, but that was a nice little athletic display there by Turner. And then he was lifted from the game because he was traded to the Mariners for an outfielder named R.J. Schreck. So 2 deals with their 1977 expansion cousins, the Seattle Mariners.
Yeah, and to me, that was, again, just a case of moving the salary. They did send some cash along with Justin Turner. I'm not sure how much, but we'll talk about that also. But Schreck, who is the prospect that came back, is not even, I don't even think, a top 50. And I take exception to the fact that he was entered onto the Blue Jays top 30 list at number 27 when he didn't even exist on the Seattle list. And the reason I take exception is that Sam Shaw is a young infielder, an now 19-year-old infielder taken in the 2023 draft from Vancouver or from BC. And he was number 27 when he was drafted. He was drafted in the 9th round, and here it is. He was drafted 3 picks ahead of Schreck, who is now 24 years old. So he's 5 years older than Sam Shaw and got half the bonus that Sam did in the 9th round. And now, just because he switches organizations, he gets moved up. Of course, there's so many prospects that moved in that Shaw was moved out of the top 30. But that doesn't mean that Schreck automatically should jump in ahead. There's no reason. And sometimes you look at these MLB Pipeline and Baseball America rankings and you go, do they really know? Or are they just, putting something in there that might be popular? But that's the sort of thing that you have to take with a grain of salt, that Schreck is moved into the 27 spot for no apparent reason. That's my gripe.
Schreck ain't Drek, says MLB Pipeline.
Well, donkey.
Now, big business. This is the one that caught a lot of people's attention. And in reading Shai Davidi's piece, Ben Nicholson-Smith, both on Sportsnet, Gregor Chisholm, and others, the trade of Yusei Kikuchi to the Houston Astros. And this is the deal where there's optimism. And executives that some of the names I just alluded to spoke to expressed surprise, and pleasant surprise on behalf of the Blue Jays, at the haul that they were able to get back. Now, none of this is ever guaranteed, right? Nothing is guaranteed. But Santiago Espinal was a nice little pickup for the Blue Jays in the Steve Pearce trade with Boston at the 2018 deadline. Pearce went on to be the World Series MVP. Espinal was an afterthought. Pearce was an impending free agent and wasn't coming back to Toronto. And the Jays got a handful of decent seasons, including an all-star year out of Santiago Espinal. These guys, at least 2 of them, have higher floors than Espinal and could be contributing before this season is out. In fact, it may be almost immediate for somebody like Joey Loperfido, but it's Jake Bloss, a starting pitcher. He has made some starts for Houston this year. has struggled in those starts, but is absolutely dominating at AAA. And that's the key right now. Still a young man, still getting his feet wet.
Yeah, he was from last year's draft. So he was from the 23 draft. He went to Louisiana Lafayette and then ended up at Georgetown, which isn't really a producer of great baseball talent, more basketball. But he has been impressive. And for him to even make 3 major league starts in his first full professional season is very impressive. And
it is. It tells you just how many injuries the Astros have had in their starting rotation, but don't take anything away from the kid.
He would not have had that opportunity were it not for all the injuries that had taken place, obviously. But the fact that he responded and showed some maturity, he is 22 or 23, I think. So
yep.
He's still young, but he's not like a 19-year-old kid or anything like that. But and when Ross Atkins talked about the trade for Kikuchi specifically, he talked about, what we had spoken about on Monday, this supply and demand, the fact that there would be competition to get a talented left-hander who throws 97, 98, and has great stuff and has the ability to come out of the bullpen. And that was something that Ross mentioned, even though he did emphasize at that point that this guy is a starting pitcher. It's not, but he has the ability, if you go into the postseason, to come out of the bullpen and contribute that way. So the difference in the haul that the Blue Jays got for Kikuchi is exactly that. It was supply and demand.
Yeah, and there are questions around Garrett Crochet, and there were leading into the deadline, and were the Giants going to move off of Blake Snell or not? Kikuchi was a certainty to move, and the Jays jumped about 24 hours before the deadline to get it done. Interesting note on Will Wagner, the third name on the banner there. His father is an Astros legend. Billy Wagner was a great closer for Houston and later Philadelphia. Billy Wagner was throwing 100+ miles an hour when nobody else was.
And it's funny, the description of Will Wagner as a minor league player is pretty close to the description of Kevin Biggio as a minor league player, because they were both obviously from that environment, major league environment, being around ballparks with their fathers, and both basically with the same organization, the Houston Astros. And so he's got a chance to be a major leaguer, but I don't think a starting major leaguer. And as for Joey Loperfido, I think we saw him earlier in the season, opening series, maybe a couple of appearances there. But you never know. And he's got some good scouting reports. He knows. Just watching the game tonight, he was in the dugout and he was chatting it up with Davis Schneider, and he knows some of George Springer, because when Springer was leaving the Astros, he was just coming in at that point. So, but you never know what you're going to get. So even though he has major league time, are you getting Teoscar Hernandez, or are you getting Derek Fisher or Socrates Brito, or one of those, or Bradley Zimmer? Those are guys that were highly touted but didn't really end up contributing much. So you never know. But the fact that these 3 higher prospects came over for Kikuchi, that was a good deal for Ross Atkins and for the Blue Jays. But before we high five Ross for that deal, should be the comparison. The analogy I used earlier today was that, here's a guy that was going to law school, dropped out of law school and became a great plumber. That's Ross Atkins. He never really reached the goal that he was looking for, but what he's doing now, he's doing quite well.
Hey, don't crap on the trades, though. We need more tradespeople. We need more tradespeople. We need more, especially for helpless idiots like me.
Pipes that need cleaning.
Yeah, pipes that toilets that get jammed. There have been a few of those at least on the field at Rogers Center this year. Can't speak to the bathrooms there.
Let's just wrap up the list of trades then.
Yeah, so Trevor Richards to the Twins for an infielder named Jay Harry.
Yeah, well, I think that's just a Trevor Richards, the way he had pitched over the last month and a bit. If you can get someone to take the remaining contract, it's only 33% of 2.1 million or whatever. So if you can get someone, you'll take any Tom, Jay, or Harry, you know,
or Charles in charge, Charles McAdoo.
But he's got more of an upside. I mean, there are some people who think that Charles McAdoo can do the job, and he's got some power, and so he's got more upside than Jay Harry.
Well, and you know, the Pirates get another year of Isaiah Kiner-Falefa.
Yeah,
and
they took that contract, which we'll talk about also.
Right, and I say this somewhat facetiously because I didn't look it up. I mean, it's quite possible Kiner-Falefa will be the highest paid Pirate next year.
Yeah,
right, at like $7.5 million.
Just like in Oakland, I think the Blue Jays sent someone who was making $7 million, and that was the highest paid Oakland A, which is crazy, you know, or Sacramento A, whatever it is now.
And then the last deal, Ryan Yarbrough, Blue Jays fans know this name, ex-Tampa Bay Ray. Big, lanky, tall left-hander, doesn't throw hard, doesn't pitch well against anybody except the Blue Jays, and now he's a Blue Jay. He's the return from the Dodgers for Kevin Kiermaier, so he'll just eat some innings, Griff, between now and the end of the year.
There will be innings to eat, trust me.
Yeah.
Plenty of them.
And before we get to comments, General Manager Ross Atkins met with the media and has said that the Jays are now under the $237 million lowest threshold of the competitive balance tax. So this, if the Jays end the season this way, and there's no reason to believe that they won't, because
there's no trading at this point.
And you just don't, you don't pick up salaried guys who end up on the waiver wire.
He called
they will reset their CBT penalties,
which is an important factor to consider for Blue Jays fans, because if this was going to be a one-off that where you tried to go for the postseason again in 2024, realize that you screwed up in building a roster, and then we're going to go back to rebuilding, they wouldn't have worried about going under the penalty, under the $237 million, because they were willing to pay the penalty anyway. So what it means to me is that they wanted to get under it and reset the penalty clock so they could go over it again next year. And that was the indication that Ross Atkins gave on the Zoom call, is that they are going for it. He said we're going for it in 25 and 26, and he actually apologized to the fan base, which I don't think I had ever heard those words come out of his mouth before. But he said it was unacceptable, and I apologize to our fans. We have to create a better environment for run scoring.
Yeah,
which is a pretty simple observation that fans were already on top of in no uncertain words on social media. So at least he admitted it. At least he apologized. And it was just something he said near the tail end of his availability. And I think it surprised me and surprised a lot of people that he went that far.
Well, what bothers me about that, Griff, is that there were more than a handful of people with allegedly far less expertise who were pointing out the very same thing in the offseason when they didn't get Ohtani, and getting Ohtani was never likely. You and I remember you and I were consistently saying Ohtani is a Dodger until he signs somewhere else. Like, he's got to prove he's not going to the Dodgers by signing with someone else.
Yeah.
And then it was just
the Ohtani contract was always going to be an investment for Rogers, for ownership. It was an investment. It wasn't a baseball move as much as it was a moneymaker for the owner. And there's no other contract out there. I mean, Juan Soto, I don't think you could have sold streaming rights in Times Square, Tokyo, because you signed Juan Soto. But you certainly would have and could have with Shohei Ohtani. And I think that's the major difference. And fans were expecting that $700 million, or as speculated, 600, like the Dodgers went higher than anybody else because they deferred everything. But say it was 600 million, people were expecting that money would be spent elsewhere in the offseason on other players, and that was never going to happen.
Well, I don't think it had to be $600 million. I just think people looked and said, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa's never been a league average hitter. Right. Why are we bringing back Kevin Kiermaier? He's definitely not going to have the same offensive season in 2024 that he did in 2023, and that turned out to be true.
Yeah. I think Atkins was apologizing for the miscalculation that his front office had in falling in love with run prevention because they had 4 starting pitchers plus Alek Manoah coming back and a bullpen that was pretty deep at spring training but got shallower and shallower as April, May, and June wore on. So they believe that we can score runs if we can prevent runs. And clearly they will have to go in a different direction this offseason. You're going to see some guys who can pound the ball and can't field as well as me or you.
Yeah, they next year in left field, I want to see a slugger.
Right.
Because Varsho's playing center and Springer, and let's cross our fingers and hope that what George Springer has done over the last month is proof that he has unlocked something. To me, you have a pretty good outfield. Springer's a good enough right fielder still defensively that you can cheat Varsho a little to the left side and help him cover ground that a slugging, not good defensive left fielder may not be able to cover.
We're not talking as your slugger, not good left field defender. We're not talking Davis Schneider because he's not a slugger. And we're talking about somebody with major league experience whose name recognition will resonate with the fan base and who will hit you 30 home runs, let's say. So, I mean, you can always put a defensive replacement in like they did with Varsho and Kiermaier until now. But you can always have somebody for that role who gets the occasional start. But that's one of your 4-man bench would be a legitimate 4th outfielder who can play defense and swing the bat just a little bit.
Ross Atkins also said at no time did the Blue Jays consider trading Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or Bo Bichette. So those two will be back next year, and barring contract extensions for either, they will enter their final year before free agency, and the Jays are going to take another run at this. I feel like I've twisted and broken my ankles jumping on and off the sign Vladdy bandwagon, although I've never been opposed to signing him. It's just not been clear to me, Griff, in terms of term and dollar, where those numbers should fall. Just everything. And now in the last couple of months, it's like Vladdy is looking like 2021 Vlad again.
Yeah. But, and he is only 25 years old, which to me, the fact that they haven't signed him to this point doesn't mean that they don't desperately want to sign him sometime in the offseason. But the Blue Jays have never been bar setters in terms of what to clear in terms of contract and salary. They've never set the bar. They've tried to go over the bar. They've tried to knock the bar off. They've tried to go under the bar. But in terms of setting the parameters of what you should be paying Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I think they would wait until contracts like Juan Soto and Pete Alonso, that type of thing. And then they would go off of that because that's the way the Blue Jays have done it, especially in all the times where the organization under Alex Anthopoulos and JP Ricciardi, the organization was used to bump the price elsewhere, and they got tired of it. So now they wait. And so you won't see an October end of the World Series boom, an offer on the table for Vlad, but I think that they'll seriously be talking with his people and telling them that they are very interested, because like I've always said, you need one or two people from your development system to be the cornerstone of your contending team. And Vlad is definitely, the way he's emerged again this year, is to me is that guy.
And I know Bichette's trade market will be depressed coming off of what has turned out to be an injury-riddled season, on top of just a not very good at all season when he has been on the field, Griff. I will be intrigued to see how they handle that this offseason. Because I don't think you can be comfortable with the notion of walking Bo right to free agency.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can be comfortable right now with the idea of offering him a monster contract extension. And you need somebody. And I don't know if it's the general manager, because I just don't think he's got communication skills. But you need somebody to sit down with Bo and listen to him.
Yeah.
And have a conversation back and forth where maybe Bo's doing a lot of the talking, at least at the outset, to get a sense of where his head is at. Because that joie de vivre is Gonzo Alonso. Haven't seen it at all this year. The article that Rosie DiMano did after she had a one-on-one sit-down with him probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, this was before he got hurt, he copped to some things that you and I have simply observed by watching ball games. Like he acknowledged, I've got to find that fire again. He didn't say the fire's gone, but he acknowledged he needed to find it again, which tells you it's at least diminished. So they're in a rock hard place situation.
Well, he knows. I think Bo is the more likely of the two not to sign and to go and test free agency. We both agree on that. I think a lot of people agree that it would be very difficult in this next offseason to keep him from becoming a free agent at the end of 25. But he does need to have, whenever he comes back, and hopefully it's sometime in August, comes back, he needs to have a strong finish to show everyone, not just the Blue Jays, that he can be healthy and that he can return to the leading base hit American League guy that he was. But I think we talked about it a month or two ago, when there was talk about Bo being traded at the deadline. And I went through the 18 contending teams, and 14 of them had a shortstop who was better than Bo, playing better than Bo, and didn't need Bo. So, like, your value is only as, and we talked about it with Kikuchi, your value is only as much as people will give for your services. And I did notice just before Bo got hurt, we talked also that even with 2 strikes, his 2-strike approach was out the window, and he was still doing the high leg kick, striking out, hitting, making weak contact. But in the week before he went down with the second calf injury, I noticed that on all 3 pitches, strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, he was using his old 2-strike approach. So I think he was getting serious and getting to the point where, hey, I got to perform. I can't just go out here and say I'm Bo Bichette, so pay me. He had to perform. He's 26 years old. He's still a young guy, but how can you lose it that quickly and that hard? And I think with regard to losing it and looking like you've lost it, it comes back to what you were just talking about. The joie de vivre, the love of being in that clubhouse seemed to have disappeared, and he needs to get it back.
Yeah, and let's be honest, Griff. I mean, I'm a Bo Bichette fan, and I root for him, and I want things to be well for him. And whether that's with the Blue Jays or somewhere else, when it's all said and done, he controls that as much or more than anybody else. But there are holes in that young man's game. I submit on the whole hitting approach thing. He's not going to change. He is who he is. I've listened to enough people who follow the team closely enough. That's just who Bo is. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But when you're not hitting and you refuse to take walks, it looks bad. And it has been. And the other thing is he is a better defender now than he was 2 or 3 years ago, but he is not anywhere close to that level of elite defensive shortstop in Major League Baseball. He's just not. So there are holes in the game. This guy is a superstar, we're told, but there are significant gaps that other superstars don't have.
Yeah, you talk about we've listened to a lot of people. I think he's listened to too many people, and we've talked about that too. He needs, if he's going from every pitch with a high leg kick and then every pitch with the toe to heel approach, then maybe he's listening to too many people. But defensively, you point out, I mean, I'm much more comfortable watching Leo Jimenez approach a ground ball than you ever are watching Bo. And that's not a good thing when you're one of the best offensive shortstops or all-round shortstops are supposed to be. And it's just something that until we can get it out of our head, watching him throw to first base on the run on every play, then he's not going to have the value that he thinks he is, or the market value.
Let's get to some comments here, and we welcome your comments. We thank you for being with us. Let's get to Rob Brander here. Is this sell-off a blessing in disguise? If we'd played better, perhaps we're a buyer and made the playoffs, we'd still have a ton of free agents and a barren farm system next year. Well, I look, Griff, I know exactly what Rob is saying, but I'm not sure there's a shade of lipstick pretty enough to slap on this pig of a season.
Well,
we ain't here to watch a 90-loss team.
Yeah,
but I do understand where Rob is coming from.
Well, I mean, a blessing in disguise, I think that can be interpreted several different ways, and I'll interpret it the way that Rob wants to interpret it. Yes, I think it is, because from 2020 to 2023, when they believed they were contenders and yet haven't won a postseason game, but they were winning 89, 90, 91, whatever, they traded away 29 prospects from their own farm system and only got back 7. And we can go down the list. I mean, I don't think we need to, because everyone knows there are Austin Martins and there's Simeon Woods Richardsons and there Jordan Groshans and all of those guys, Sam Roberts and Adam Kloffenstein. But 29 and replace them with 7. So when people were going, well, this farm system isn't very deep, and nobody that they traded away has really made an impact at the major league level, is the bottom line is that farm system needed to be replenished. And the only way they would do it, what did you say that they got back? 14 players, 13
prospects. Yeah, because we're not counting Yarbrough as a prospect, obviously.
Yeah, no, hell no. He wasn't a prospect when he was a prospect.
Yeah.
So you got 13 this year and 7 from 20 to 24. So that's 20. They're still on the negative side of prospects traded to received, but it certainly allows the farm system to take a deep breath and start playing their own prospects at the level they should be at. When you've traded all those people, now you've got a reserve of prospects at the player development complex. Some of them play in the complex league. But when there's a vacancy at Dunedin, at Vancouver, in New Hampshire, one replacement, it trickles up, and you get 3 guys playing at their wrong level because your farm system isn't deep enough. And I think that what Rob's talking about is, and what we're talking about is, you get to reset the farm system. And if they're truthful about going out and spending that same, going over the limit of $237 million, the first level of luxury tax penalty, then it's been a good thing. But as you point out, if they lose 90 to 95 games, it's not a good thing. They need this group of young players with the 3 or 4 starting pitchers that are veteran guys that can eat 6 innings every 5 days. They need those guys to step up, and they can't let this fall apart with a bullpen that sucks. And with Vlad being the only guy carrying it, Spencer Horwitz stepping beyond what people thought he could do, except on exit philosophy, we always said he should be there, right? I think we did.
Well, I just remember all I've said is ever since he came up, he's just been thoroughly impressive. I think the guy's great. I mean, I don't know what the future holds, Griff. I'm not going to predict him as anything, but how nice would that be if he's playing second base on opening day next year?
Yeah.
I mean, doing it confidently.
The other day when they finished the game, I think there was an injury and they finished the game. The average age on the 9 men on the field, Zach Pop was on the mound, was 26.1 years old, and there was nobody on the field older than 28. Ernie Clement was the oldest player out there, 28.1. And, of course, DH, I wasn't counting DH, just the 9 guys that were on the diamond. And the DH was Justin Turner at 39, but he's gone now. So It's going to be a younger team. They cannot have Vlad stop hitting, because then, there'll be 2 or 3 runs every game, and people will, the fans that are loving what's happening now won't be loving it in September. If they
Griff, let's be honest about what this is. This is a dopamine rush. Right? This is the trade deadline. A bunch of stuff happened. And the next couple of months will be about assessing Spencer Horwitz, who's been playing really well and, for God's sake, has a better approach in the batter's box than most of his teammates. Can he carry it forward for another couple of months? So now, to me, I always used to say, if you're a diehard baseball fan and you want to stick with your team till game 162 of a lost and brutal to watch season, pick guys you want to watch. And that's what this is going to be about, is about the Horwitzes of the world. Can Barger sort of get his footing? Does Davis Schneider pop out of the slump? This sort of stuff.
For Ross, I think it's more of a rope-a-dopamine rush. But let's see. I saw one question here that interested me, and it's Jeremy.
Okay, well, you want to get to Jeremy?
That one, because we're talking about Ross.
Okay, so we'll come back to El Yefi in a minute. Jeremy says Atkins needs to be fired no matter how badly he robbed Houston. I will defer to you, Griff, to open this one up.
Yeah, I mean, he needs to be, and if they were going to start a rebuild at the All-Star break, we were saying that he should be replaced. He shouldn't be the one moving forward with this. But they were just getting rid of 6 mistakes. Well, not 6 mistakes, but 6 guys that were pending free agents. And then they happened to get rid of Nate Pearson and IKF. They needed that contract to be gone so that they could move razor's edge, as Ross called it, under the first threshold for penalties. So, he could be allowed to do it, and he was allowed to do it. But I do agree with Jeremy that, and fired is a tough word. I think at the end of the season, maybe on the final weekend, they should just let him go. And I guess that's the same as being fired, right?
Yeah, I mean, because he's under contract.
Introduce James Click in the clubhouse so players know that moving forward, it's going to be a different feeling, a different environment, a different building process, different relationship.
But is it, Griff? Is it? The president's going to be the same.
Yeah. But he's never in the clubhouse unless he's working out. And I've seen his, I mean, it's a development. Even when I was there for 4 years in PR, I didn't see him really interfering in that building process of a roster. And if James Click was there, I don't see him interfering there. It's just a different outlook, a different way of looking at building a better, what did he say? Better run scoring environment. Yeah. I think that's when it should be done with Ross. I don't think after 9 years that you have to apologize for moving on and finding someone else to take the reins. And I think it should be done on the final weekend of the season.
Well, he's also getting well paid next year because he's under contract.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, we won't set up what do you call those accounts? Where you're raising money?
GoFundMes?
Yeah, GoFundMe. We won't do that.
He'll be fine. I agree with you. It's time for this to change. I just am not sure what exactly changes when I just look to the very top and wonder what's going on. And we all know that Mark Shapiro is not the very top, so that's not who I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. You're going even higher.
Absolutely no idea who's paying attention or not. Absolutely no idea.
They will pay attention if in a 95 loss season nobody's watching in September. They will pay attention.
It's
Isn't the Hockey World Cup on at some point?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out a way to say this without absolutely stepping in it. But we'll just leave it as I have questions about what's going on at the very, very top. Let's see. El Yeffe, we'll come back to you now. Losing Nate Dogg, so that would be Nate Pearson, stung a bit. Still under control. Would it have hurt to hold on to him for another season? They didn't exactly get a great haul in return. I have to say, Griff, I'll just jump in and then you can fill in some blanks. Sometimes it's just time. And, you know, if the Chicago Cubs unlock something with Nate Pearson, the way that and I know the coaching staff has changed, but the way that they unlock something with Jake Arrieta that the Baltimore Orioles couldn't a decade ago, then I imagine some people here will lose their minds. But Pete Walker ain't a dummy. He is considered one of the best pitching coaches in Major League Baseball, and he didn't lose that ability. And it just, for whatever reason or reasons, didn't work out. Nate really never got his footing underneath him. And sometimes it's just a change of scenery, right? And if the Cubs unlock something, God bless them. But I don't see Nate Pearson, with his propensity to give up fly balls that tend to travel, doing better at Wrigley than he did at Rogers Center.
Yeah, I think that a big problem with Nate is that the inconsistency, because as a manager in 2024, you're planning on a 5 or 6 inning start and maybe hoping for 7, but 5 or 6 innings, and then you got 3 relievers coming in. And if you have one weak link every night in that 3 reliever procession, you're gonna be disappointed. You're gonna lose more games than you win. And Nate Pearson was consistent in his inconsistency of one poor outing every 3. Now, if you're drawing up a game plan and you've got him in there 3 out of 6 nights and he screws up one night, you have other guys like that. Zach Pop is another one like that. Ryan Burr, whatever his name is like that. So Nate Pearson was not going to have a role on a winning team in 2025. And if you believe that that's their goal is 2025 and 2026 contending again, then Nate Pearson was not going to be there. And I know he was only making $800,000. And I know that he still throws 98, 99, 100. And he's got a slider that he really doesn't locate exactly where he wants. So, yeah, I have no objection. I have no problem with them dealing him to the Cubs. And as you said, Scotty, God bless them if they think they can change things with Nate Pearson. But he's been around long enough and had more than enough chances to make a mark here, and he hasn't done it.
Nice comment from Darren. Big fan of the pod. My 2 sons and I listen every week on our way to baseball practice. Hello from Beaver Lodge, Alberta, from the Thomas family. Love Griff's guest spots on the McCowan pod too. Beaver Lodge is up there too, Griff. I think that's like truly northern Alberta. Love it.
Be close to where you went for that dinner with Gibby, isn't it?
Well, I'm not going to lie and say that I've got Alberta's geography locked down. I did happen to look it up. See, Lloydminster's on the Saskatchewan border. Lloydminster.
Oh, yeah. So I'm thinking the wrong side, yeah.
Beaver Lodge is over more toward the BC side.
Right.
So, but that's awesome. I mean, love that northern Alberta is chiming in. Let's see, Bobby Kelly. At least for the rest of the season, we can watch the kids lose and not the team promised to contend for a postseason spot. Let's see what they have.
And we are going to see what they have. And even some of the guys that were just acquired. The Jonathan Clase, I'm actually looking forward to seeing him, a guy that once he gets on base, a guy like that reminds me of Otis Nixon. This guy's got more power, though. I think he's 5'10", 150. He must swing the hell out of the bat if he hits 20 home runs one year. But I just love that type of baseball, and so maybe we'll get a chance to see him. I'm not so high on the outfielder from the Astros, but there will be, and Spencer Horwitz going to play every day, and another guy, Addison Barger, swings the bat like he means it. There's some players that are looking forward, but fans, the real fans love that. But there's too much inventory for the Blue Jays to be selling where they cannot afford to lose 90 to 95 to 100 games, and that's a distinct possibility. And the kids working their way into the major league picture aren't going to save that if the bullpen and the starting rotation can't do their jobs.
Well, yeah, and you commented on the podcast, Griff, about TV ratings over the final couple of months, and I know that this isn't a factor in August, but it certainly becomes a factor in September. I mean, the NFL season, hell, the Hall of Fame game is 2 nights away. The preseason starts, but the NFL season's about 5-6 weeks away, and there is a Thursday night game every week and a Monday night game every week, and Sunday, people are going to start getting distracted with other things.
Yeah, and the real fans love watching these kids develop. But it just, if Vlad isn't hitting like he is right now, if George Springer tails off, there's not very many guys. It's being disguised. The weakness in that lineup is being obscured by the fact that Vlad is just hitting the shit out of the ball.
Man, that home run in the first game, I know they got killed in Baltimore in the first game of the doubleheader, but going and getting that fastball up and away and then hitting it on a line over that high wall in right field to the opposite. I mean, and that it didn't kiss the foul pole, but it was a true opposite field shot. It wasn't into the alleys. I mean,
and the one in the second game
right now.
One in the second game was just a line drive to center field that kept carrying, backspin over the fence. And when they showed the picture of George Springer in the dugout, like even as long as he's been around the game, he couldn't believe it. I know that he has a little extra histrionics sometime, but like some of his commercials are terrible. But
okay, Burger Boy. Okay, Burger Boy.
Oh, those are great. That's great acting by Vlad in those commercials.
Okay, Burger Boy.
But yeah, no, Vlad is carrying this offense, and to say that he's going to do it for the next 2 months, I mean, he might be threatening for a Triple Crown if that happens. But so I don't think it will. And then others will have to step up, and we'll see how much fans love that when they're back to scoring 1, 2, or 3 runs every game.
YouTube user, which is a very strange last name to have and a very strange first name to have, especially if you're old enough that you predate YouTube. I mean, parents were just looking ahead. Schneider has got to be hating his job right now. Griff, how does he seem when you're at the ballpark? Okay, so we'll go Schneider's in order alphabetically. Start with Davis. And I'm kidding. John Schneider's got to be hating his job right now. I would look at it this way if I'm him, Griff. I got one of 30 jobs. And that's good fortune, baby.
Well, that's actually the way he does look at it. Whenever I throw him like an off question that has some sarcasm within, he takes it the way it was meant to be delivered. I mean, we're all looking at the same thing. Lucky for him, he's got others, coaches in the same boat as him who see the game the same way. I see him and Pete Walker together, and I smile because these guys they live with and die with this, what's happening on the field there. And you can see it with Pete when his pitchers aren't doing well. But yeah, John Schneider is taking it with a grain of salt. I mean, and that's a beautiful way that you put it, is that it's one of 30 jobs. And, he was offered the job. He took the job. He's doing his best at the job. And, at some point, somebody's going to say your best isn't good enough, and he's going to move on like every manager does. But for now, he's thriving and enjoying.
Yeah. It's like Dave Canales with the Carolina Panthers. He's working for a totally insane person that's going to make his job impossible, but it's one of 32 NFL head coaching jobs, right? And even if it's the only one Canales could get at this point in his career, you ain't going to say no to the money or to the opportunity. We'll go back to our buddy Rob. Is it just me, or does Vlad look particularly lean and fit? More so than earlier in the year. He also seems to be moving well. I've noticed the same thing, Griff. And look, I don't want to sound like an idiot, although I've done that more than my fair share in my life. When he got his haircut, I don't know if that changed the optics or if he has actually continued to drop weight and is on a regimen throughout the season. Because to me, even when he slimmed down entering 2021 off of a 2020 shortened season where, he had to DH a lot and I think his durability was a problem for him, at least to the point where he couldn't play the field every day. He looks better today than he did in early 2021 when he had slimmed down.
Yeah, I think that, with regard to his hair, honestly, I'm not making a joke here. I think that the fact of not having to have the helmet come off and then replace the hair under the helmet, I think his focus is more on what he's actually doing on the field. I do believe that off the field, maybe he's not eating as much of his grandma's food that he used to eat that was all rich in calories and blah, blah. I think he's taking care of himself. He's still 25 years old. So I do notice that he seems in better shape and he seems to be enjoying himself more. obviously, the way that he's hitting. But it's a great pleasure to watch him play baseball at this point. And and part of it is not tucking the hair back after every swing. So
but he, you were more patient with him than I was. I mean, we were both saying, look, this guy's having a really good season, but I just raised my hand and say, like, he's not hitting home runs, and this team needs him to hit home runs. And now that started.
At 7, I called him a 30 home run guy, baby.
You
Remember
did.
that? Yeah.
You did. And that was in response to me saying he was on pace to hit 15. And I know you're going to tweak that and say, oh, you said he was going to hit 15. Well, I said he was on pace, which he was. But I didn't have him hitting 30 either when he had 7 at the 80 or 81 game mark. New Brunswick, Canada guy chiming in. Maybe Bo should cut his hair too.
I mean,
let me stand up for the long hair crowd.
Yeah.
No.
Addison Barger, you had Raimel Tapia when he was here. This team used to have at least a dozen guys with fabulous hair that I only wish I could have had.
You got Kevin Gosman with stuff coming out of the back of his hat. A little shorter, but it still has it.
But I don't think I think hair is an individual thing, and I think yours looks great, Scotty.
This was the best pandemic decision of my life, Griff. When the barber shops and salons reopened, I'm like, I didn't come this far to stop now. So there you have it. I'm going to ride this thing until.
But the whole Vlad experience, the whole Vlad experience that we're watching right now, hair and everything else, hair, nails, everything big. No, that's Drake, I think, sings that, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think you're more up on your hip hop than I am.
But just watching him right now is a pleasure, and hopefully he can keep it up. But it's a pleasure, and he's enjoying himself. And that leadership, I think that leadership can rub off on some people. I wish they would bring back some of the friends that he had that made that dugout such a chemistry lab, But
are you talking about, say, somebody whose name rhymes with Bayoscar or Hernandez?
Perhaps. That's the type of guy that doesn't play left field the greatest, but can hit the ball out of the ballpark regularly, is good in the clubhouse, is good in the dugout. And earlier in this podcast, we were talking about a guy just like that. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah. And in saying that is not a criticism of the decision to trade Teoscar a couple of years ago. I mean, at the time that made sense for a variety of reasons. His offense was not adequately replaced. Number one. Number two, he would provide exactly what they need right now. And I continue to believe that George Springer plays a good enough right field that you can align your outfield with Varsho as your center fielder to cheat Dalton just a couple of steps to his right toward left field to help cover for whatever lack of range or bopping left fielder that you're going to sign or acquire somehow in the offseason is going to struggle with next year. And because I do think you've got to have some offense out of that spot. It's available next year, and you've got to have a guy who can occupy it more days than not, who can swing the bat and be a threat in the middle of the lineup.
Yeah, for most of this season, the Blue Jays roster only included 3 legitimate outfielders, and they filled in with the versatility, and their run prevention. These guys could all play different positions. Nobody could name who your regular third baseman was or who your regular second baseman was. And left field, like the fourth outfielder was a combination of infielders playing the outfield. And they need a fourth outfielder like we've described to play left field every day and drive in some runs and make the occasional mistake and be a part of an exciting team that this fan base needs to see.
Like Ross Atkins, when I was around the team years ago, Griff, and they were building this thing up, or tearing it down and then building it back up, Ross Atkins would say, we want to get to the point where we're another Dodgers, which he meant that he wanted to have more than 8 starting position players available every single day. And so that some guys would come off the bench, there'd be lefties who could hit righties, righties who could hit lefties. You could mix and match later in ball games, but you essentially had 11 or 12 starters. And, I look at it this year and, I had Biggio and Kiner Falefa, and Kiner Falefa was very good for the Jays. I'm not going to take anything away from IKF, but like, let's be honest. It's not like he was ever going to bust out with a 25 home run season. He played 162 games. So they had Kiner Falefa, that, Schneider's still a young player, and what is he really? And so I looked at it and I'm like, this is the true definition of the poor man's Dodgers. Like the Dodgers, you can identify that guy is a starting second baseman. Max Muncy is a starting third baseman against right-handed pitchers. But like the Jays went in missing half of an infield to start the season.
It used to be that if you were one of the top 5 spenders in baseball, and I'll take the Yankees as an example, because I was always mad at that Yankee organization when I was covering for the Stars, that you would go in there, you would look at their payroll, top 3 in baseball, and you would look at their bench, and they would have 3 guys on the bench that would be starters for 20 other teams, but they were paying them like starters for 20 other teams. They were paying him the money, and that made the Yankees the deepest team in the American League. And now anyone in the top 5, take the Blue Jays, for example, they think that if you're going to spend that much money, spend it on specific guys and then fill in around them. And that's not the way that the Yankees classically did it. They paid guys to be bench players. They paid them like starters, like Vernon Wells, for instance. And there's a lot of guys like that who finished their career, made a lot of money with the Yankees, played maybe 80, 70 games. And now there's teams that don't know how to use their money, and they're paying it all to the rotation, and they're paying it. And when it comes to filling the 4 men on the bench, they got like guys making major league minimum with no particular skill that can help you late in a game. And that's the difference between this Jays team and the earlier Yankees teams.
New Brunswick, Canada guy, unless the Jays get at least 2 big bats in the offseason, all they will be doing is contending for last place again. And then he follows it up by saying, by that I mean 30 homer, 100 RBI bats. I don't care what it costs. In the AL East, it's all about offense. Exhibit 1 is the Orioles.
Yeah, the Orioles did it by losing 100 games 3 out of 4 years. And they have a tremendous, deep youth movement, and they can all swing the bat and they can all drive the ball. But I agree with New Brunswick guy that they do need 2 of those players. Vlad is going to be one of them, but I think he's saying add them. So that would be Vlad plus 2 more guys. I think that if they got 1 more guy as a left fielder, like we're talking about, just a guy who rakes, that would be enough. Get another catcher who can provide just a little bit of offense and take a load off of Kirk, and maybe even play as many games as Kirk. But you need some offense out of your catching position. But yeah, they need to spend money because they're in the AL East, and that's what you have to do. You can't say Matt Chapman didn't hit very well, but he did defend great. So let's get IKF because he can defend great. And maybe he can even produce what Chapman did. Well, you were expecting far more from Chapman. It was a huge disappointment. So you want to settle for a guy who's already at that disappointment level and call him your starting third baseman because the last guy disappointed? It makes no sense.
And then when he overperforms, he's having a great season by his standards, which is true, but by his standards, not by what you need. And that's not the fault of the player. I also want to give a shout out to New Brunswick because we have New Brunswick, Canada guy. New Brunswick it's too forgotten about. Ever since I've moved out here to the Maritimes and I visit Fredericton, Moncton, you name it, put some love on New Brunswick. It's a great province and not enough people have visited.
I worked a whole summer in Millville, New Brunswick, driving spikes for the railroad. So yeah, I love New Brunswick.
Jeez, you help lay the tracks that get people coast to coast in this
the golden spike.
Jeez, Griff, wow. Let's see, because we're running short on time here. Well, Bobby wants to know, Bobby Kelly, do you think Teo would return to Toronto if Shapiro and Atkins are still here, considering he was traded in part to change the culture?
I think Vlad being here would be more important. In fact, it might help strike a deal with Vlad moving forward. But, it's a business. And I think even though it's a cliche and you hear players say it's a business, I think they understand. And the great thing about baseball, the great thing about sports, and Bobby, I'm sure you've played sports, is that you make friendships that last no matter where you are. I mean, you could get traded. Like I see guys that were with the Expos during the 90s and 80s, and I see them, and it's like you pick up the conversation right where you left off. And that's the great thing about sports and being in a clubhouse. So Teoscar and Vlad will be friends no matter what for the rest of their careers, probably for the rest of their lives. And so if they got back together, I don't think they would look at the front office and go and shake a fist at Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins and go, oh, these are the guys that kept us apart, because nothing keeps you apart when you're blood brothers.
Well, and also there are ways if an apology is needed, and one isn't needed, but I don't know how better to phrase it. If an apology is needed, $25 million a year for 3 years would do it. I mean, Teo's playing on a 1-year contract with the Dodgers right now, having a really nice year for them, and they've needed his bat because they've just had so much weird stuff and injuries go on around him. I don't think he'd be looking for a ridiculous term. I think it's more than manageable to get a guy like him back in the fold.
And I meant to bring this up at some point, so I'll bring it up now about Vlad and the 25-year-old, more mature Vlad. Like the other day when you're talking about leadership, and here's a guy that is sort of making his way, and now with all the 30-year-olds being sent away, Vlad is going to be that guy. And the other day when he hit the home run in the first game of the doubleheader, and they were down 10-3, so it made it 10-4. As he crossed home plate, Stuart Baroa was waiting with the home run jacket. And Vlad, you could see him waving Baroa away. He didn't want to put that on when they're losing 10-4. To me, that's a sign of maturity, because we saw the original incarnation of the jacket, that they would put it on no matter what the score was. And I think that this more mature Vlad, understanding circumstances, is going to help this organization moving forward. And like, if he had his buddies around him, like Teoscar in left field, I think that would be great. And good for the dugout, good for the clubhouse.
All right. So I think, barring anything else you want to say, Griff, we can put a wrap on this baby. The Blue Jays acquire 14 players, 13 of them prospects. You're saying, who's the 14th then? It's a lefty, Ryan Yarbrough, who you no doubt have heard of, ex-Tampa Bay Ray, was pitching for the Dodgers until he was DFA'd. They get him for Kevin Kiermaier in the deal with LA. Otherwise, it's 13 prospects of various rankings, hoping for a big return in the deal that sent Yusei Kikuchi to the Houston Astros, and we'll throw that one up there right now. Jake Bloss, Joey Loperfido, and Will Wagner coming to the Blue Jays organization for Yusei Kikuchi. A final thought, Griff, before we put this one to bed?
Yeah, I think the final thought is that enjoy this influx of young talent, young prospects. But if they fall apart in the final 2 months, if the Blue Jays fall apart in the final 2 months, we're going to lose this. What did you call it? An influx of what? Drop of mine?
Sorry, what did I say? I mean, an influx of talent?
No.
What did I?
Some drug or some.
Oh, dopamine. Oh, yeah. No, we're going to lose the dopamine regardless.
Yeah.
This is just a dopamine rush for today and tomorrow.
Yeah, so like, remember how you're feeling right now moving forward, and have faith that whoever's the GM going into the offseason is going to make this team, or try and make this team, a contender in 25. There's no rebuild going on. And I'm tired of the word reload. They're just going to try and sign some parts, trade for some parts that make this team a true contender in 25 and 26.
Seek out dopamine elsewhere.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on the Blue Jays. Watch them as much as you want. Keep tuning into Exit Philosophy. We'll try to drop some dopamine every now and then, but also get outside, fly a kite, go to the beach, sit on a patio, have a few beers, enjoy the summer, do all that, because this Blue Jays team is what we've got now for the final 2 months.
That is correct. And thanks, everyone, for participating and for joining us today. And by and large, it's exactly, the trade deadline moves were exactly what was promised, with the 6 pending free agents being traded, and then the surprise of Nate Pearson, and then not so much of a surprise of IKF. But this is the team that we're going to have down the stretch, so let's enjoy.
Yeah, so if you would, we'd love you for it. Throw us a subscription on YouTube. Hit the like button. It helps us land on other people's homepages when they hit up YouTube. And you can find us in audio versions wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it. New episodes of Exit Philosophy drop each and every Monday. Thanks for spending an hour plus with us, and we'll talk to you early next week.
Thanks, Scotty.